Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to CUHK. Welcome to the English department. My name is Professor Julian Lamb. I'm a professor here in the department. I'd like to spend around about half an hour, 40 minutes or so, telling you things about our department. I'm sure at this stage of your life, you're sort of wondering, firstly, what am I going to do when I go to university? Secondly, you're probably also wondering, what do I want to do after university? Because what you want to do after university will obviously affect your decision as to what you do at university. You're possibly asking this question, asked here by one of the most famous characters in all theatre. This is a 100% accurate quotation from Shakespeare. To English or not to English, that is the question. And Hamlet there is agonizing about this decision, perhaps as you are agonizing about your decision. And I hope at the end of around about 30, 35, 40 or so minutes today, you will be able to say, with enthusiasm. And I bet you have a great big smile on your face as well. Our department has many, many different courses. And I think one of the strengths of our department is that it has a great variety of courses. And so it's not easy for myself and my colleagues to summarize this great variety of courses in only 30 or so minutes. But we're going to try. The first thing to say about the courses in our department is that they come under three separate strands. Now, all students will have to do courses in each of these three strands. Let me try to explain these strands for you. Firstly, applied English linguistics. In the courses in the strand of applied English linguistics, you will analyze the English language as a living entity. Now, a question we very frequently get, what is the difference between linguistics and applied English linguistics? And my answer is always the words applied and English, which is kind of a silly answer, but nevertheless, it's the right answer. In linguistics, they do not confine themselves to the language of English, they look at various other languages as well. In applied English linguistics, we're interested in English. So that's the English part of applied English linguistics. Then there's the applied part. In linguistics, they consider language from a more theoretical, conceptual point of view. In applied English linguistics, we consider English as a used entity, as a practical thing, as a language that people, ordinary people like you and I, use every day. Okay. The second strand in our department, English literary studies. And in English literary studies, we analyze critically, and at times theoretically and very closely, poetry, novels, and plays. Now, another question that we very frequently get asked in relation to ELS is, do I need to have any experience of analyzing literature in order to be admitted into your department? No. The vast majority of our students, as they come into our department, have absolutely no experience of analyzing literature. Okay? So do not worry about that. Third, communications for English majors, or SENG. And in SENG, you will do courses in which you will acquire skills in reading and also writing and also speaking. Okay? I'll talk a little bit more about the specific courses in each of these three strands in a moment. Meanwhile, I'd like to introduce you to our departmental chair, our head of department, Professor Simon Haynes, and he will say a few words about our department.
We're very glad that you've come along to listen to us and to learn something about English at CUHK. We feel, I think students feel, that ours is an extremely friendly, hospitable department. We do our very best to make you, should you choose to study with us, to make you feel at home. In the department there's a large room, a seminar room, that's more or less set aside for the use of you as undergraduates. Students write their essays in there. They have seminars and conversations and talk to each other, and sometimes they have lunch and sandwiches and their cokes in there as well. So we try to make the department be a home, a second home for you on the campus. It's not just a friendly department, but it's a department of very substantial international reputation, very high research performance. It's a young department. I don't think you'll find too many old guys like me. It's very welcoming. It's one of the oldest English departments in Hong Kong and one of the largest, with a very broad coverage of subjects in these areas of literary studies and applied linguistics. We feel that it would give you a very strong career foundation, and that it would be a very practical decision as well as a very fun decision for you to come and study with us. One statistic that I always like to mention on these occasions, this is something I came across a few years ago, is that there have been several research studies of the success rates of people working in international organizations like the UN or the OECD, that is government organizations, or in international multinational companies, corporations. And they correlated how high up the ladder people went in those international organizations with their languages. And almost always it was found that the seniority of people in top organizations correlates almost exactly with their fluency in English. So whether we like it or not, English is the world language. And it seems to be that if you study English and become fluent and articulate in this language, it's a ticket to great success, particularly in careers with an international orientation. What I want to talk about is this phrase, University Orientation Day. What does it mean? What is the meaning of the word orientation, and what is the meaning of the word university? Nobody else will tell you that today, wherever you go, whichever lectures you listen to, so I'll talk about it a bit. The word orientation, like many words in the English language, comes from another language. In fact, the roots of English lie in German, but also in Latin. It's easy to forget when you think, well, English is the language of colonizers in so much of the world in the last 100, 200 years. In fact, England was itself, for a long time, a colony. It was a colony of the Roman Empire. And through that mechanism, Latin became an important part of the English language. And the word orientation is from a Latin word, orere, which means to rise. And so it was applied particularly to one kind of rising, which is the rising of the sun. So the Orient was that part of the world where, if you are in a European perspective, where the sun rises, in other words, the east. And it came to mean orient yourself, or work out where you are in relation to the compass to get your bearings, because once you know where the east is, you can also work out where the west and the north and the south are. So orientation comes from a word meaning east, meaning rising, meaning east, meaning getting your bearings, finding out where you are. So you've come to the university today. I guess you don't need to find out where the Orient is because you are already sitting in it, but to work out which way is which within the university, and particularly to work out what a university is. This is also a chance for us to orient ourselves towards you, as well as for you to orient yourselves towards us. So then the second question is, what is a university? University, again, is a word that comes into English from that same source language from Latin. And it comes from two Latin words. The first one is the word unus, which means one. And it gives us our words like unit and unify. And the other half of the word comes from the word versus, which means a turn. And it gives us our words like diversity and conversely, and also verse. A poetry verse is a turn of language at the end of one line, turning back to the next. So universe, well, university is like universe. It means one turn. When you stand in the night, outside at night, and you look up at the sky and you do one complete turn, you see all the sun and the moon and the planets and the stars in one. It's everything you can see in one turn. That is the original meaning of universe. The meaning of university is what you see if you stand in the middle of the campus and do one complete turn. You see all the scholars in all the different subjects, in engineering, in science, in mathematics, in the humanities, in business studies, etc. And this was the original meaning of the word university when universities themselves were first created in the medieval period in the West about 1,000 years ago. That is, they were the association of all the scholars in all the major subjects at the time. In fact, in those very early days when universities were first created, the oldest ones are Paris and Bologna and Oxford, which is older than Cambridge, I believe. The universities were two things, and I think they still are. One of the things was a professional training. In the first universities, you would learn law, theology, medicine, and architecture. These were the standard professional subjects which you would learn. Nowadays, you still learn many of those, but you can also learn business studies, engineering, computer science, and so on. So that's one thing that a university has always been, a professional training school. But there's another very, very important, in fact, I would say even more fundamental, more important side of universities from the very beginning. And it was reflected in the subjects that you studied in your very first year in the original university training. And these subjects were called the trivium. And of course, wouldn't you know, it's another Latin word, and it means the three ways, the three ways. Of course, it's given us our word trivial, which gives you all the wrong ideas about what trivium was all about. Trivial meaning absolutely fundamental, so basic that you almost forget that everything else rests upon it. And those original subjects of the trivium were grammar, rhetoric, and logic. So that was the structure of language, the thought content, the logical structure of language, and also the origin of language and how to use it persuasively, which was the origin of rhetoric. So in many ways, when you're talking about literary studies and applied linguistics, you are talking about the modern day heirs, the successors, the descendants from those very first original, basic, fundamental university subjects. The same training in how to think clearly, and how to express yourself clearly in what is, after all, the world language. So that's probably about enough from me. I would just stress that fundamental training in thought is something that can be vital to you whatever career you follow, and even if you think about one of the other professional trainings, it's still relying on that basic mechanism of the trivium, grammar, rhetoric, and logic, which have become linguistics and literary studies. You could hardly do any better, I think, under those circumstances, than to choose to study the literature and linguistics of the world language in one of Hong Kong's oldest and largest and best English departments. So here you are at the crossroads of the three ways, orienting yourself in a university in the Orient, learning a bit about what is probably the oldest and most useful of all university subjects. So I guess that's my cue to hand back to Professor Lam. Thank you for listening.
As I mentioned at the beginning, our department offers a wide range of courses, very diverse courses. Not easy for me to summarize them all in half an hour. Well, I've only got around about 10 minutes left, 15 minutes left. But I'd like to try to do so using a technique, a linguistic technique that you might be familiar with, a metaphor. And when I think of these three strands and all of the different courses that operate beneath these three strands, I think that all of the courses in one way or another aim to make you feel at home in the language of English. Now, what do I mean by being at home in English? Let me highlight three ways. Firstly, home is where you know your way around. And I think that many of the courses in applied English linguistics aim to give you, if you like, a bird's eye view of the English language. A little bit like Google Maps for English. And you always know where you are in the language. You know why the language is the way it is, and you know what the correct way of using the language is. So, applied English linguistics, to understand why we use English in the way we do, and to identify the different ways in which English is used in various parts of the world. Let me take a couple of examples. Firstly, English phonetics and phonology. This is a course that has to do with the sounds of English. English, like any language, requires you to enunciate certain sounds. And English has quite particular sounds that it requires you to enunciate. Phonetics and phonology is the activity of classifying these sounds and trying to define these sounds and trying to understand what exactly they are. Sociolinguistics considers language as a social entity, as something that we use day to day in society. One of the things that some sociolinguists are very interested in is the different ways in which men and women use language to speak to each other. If you have a look on the MTR when you go home this afternoon, observe the way in which men and women talk to each other on a train. Women, if they're talking to each other on a train, they'll sort of be holding the handle like that. There'll be one standing like so, and another directly facing the other woman like so. Do men talk like that? They tend not to. One will be facing that way, the other will also be facing that way. Now, why is that? This is one of the questions that is raised in sociolinguistics. Now, I am not an applied linguist, and so I'm going to briefly hand you over to someone who is an applied linguist, and she will tell you a little bit more about these courses. Suzanne.
So linguistics is a scientific study of language. We observe interesting linguistic phenomena, and then we try to first describe these phenomena and then to explain them, to come up with a theory that can help us understand why language is used this way. So let me give you a very quick example of how language is learned by both native and non-native speakers, in particular the past tense. Right? So we all know that there are the regular verbs and the irregular verbs in English, right? So, for instance, so is the verb go regular or irregular? Does anyone know? What's the past tense of go? Went, right? Not right. So. Right, go, went, gone. So go is irregular. Now give me a regular verb in English. Yes? Give me a regular verb in English with a regular past tense. Discuss. Cut. Cut. Cut is also, what's the past tense of cut? Not cutted, right? So cut, cut, cut. So that's also irregular, unfortunately. What about one regular past tense? I am talking. In 5 minutes, I would have talked. Right? Anyway, okay. So verbs like talk, walk, fold, these verbs have regular past tense form, right? You just add an ed to form the past tense. All right, so now, a very interesting linguistic phenomenon that has been observed is that children, as they are learning English, they will begin by being able to use the irregular past tense verbs. So they'll be able to say, I went to the library, I forgot my homework, I cut my finger, right? So and then parents, of course, will be very pleased. Wow, irregular past tense verbs mastered by my child. But then after a few months, parents would start to get worried because the same children who a few months ago were able to produce irregular past tense would start to say things like, I goed to the library yesterday with my friend. I forgetted my homework and I cutted my finger. And then parents would go bonkers, oh, what's going on with my kid, right? Now, linguists tried to study this phenomenon and they came up with a theory called U-shaped development. start off, have with mastery of the form, but then there will be a sort of decline where you seem to be regressing to a non-target form. But then, luckily, after a while, the children will be able to produce the regular past tense forms again. Now, so what can explain what's going on here? So this is an interesting linguistic phenomenon, but what's going on here? What's the explanation? So in the gist, the theory is that with regular past tense, you are applying a rule. The rule is to add ed to the verb, right, to form past tense. With irregular past tense, you are using your memory. You are storing the irregular forms in different part of your mental lexicon, and you have to just remember these as separate entities through having a good memory. So it's rules versus memory-based learning. And children, when they come down to the bottom part here of the U and start to say things like, I go to the library yesterday, they are in fact overgeneralizing a rule that they are learning and trying to apply. Right? So it's not that they are regressing or they have forgotten about the irregular form, they are applying a rule. But unfortunately, they don't know where the boundaries are. So they're over-applying this rule. But that sooner or later, through input, through instruction, they will be able to draw a boundary and be able to only apply the rule to the right verbs, to the irregular verbs. Right, so this is what linguists try to do in trying to understand how language works and trying to explain why it works this way and why language is used and taught and learned this way. So that's all for me for linguistics. And can I very quickly say something about the communication for English majors courses? There are 3 in the series, and in the last series, you'll get to, because I just did this with my class last week, you get to do a round of job interviews. That's to help you get ready for job hunting and for real workplace situations. We get you all dressed up in suits, and you come in here with a job that you are interested in applying to, and we help you hone your interview skills. So it's not just about Shakespeare and social linguistics. We have a practical side, so we know that down the line you'll have to be out there and be interviewed. So we will help you with that too. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much, Suzanne. Going back to my metaphor of being at home in English. Home is where you can be yourself. Imagine yourself reflected in this mirror. Home is where you can be yourself. And in literary studies, we consider the various ways in which some of the greatest writers of English have been themselves in the language. How they have expressed their thoughts and feelings in language. And we have courses such as Romanticism to Modernism, which considers a particular period in the history of English literature. We have courses like Literature and Film. Some of our courses are quite conveniently titled, so I don't really need to tell you what they're about. Literature and Film, I think, is clear enough. These courses are about the ways in which some of the greatest writers in English have expressed themselves in English. We have other courses like Creative Writing and Drama, which actually give you the opportunity to learn techniques to express yourselves in English. I'm going to hand over now to another one of our professors, Professor Lee, and she's going to talk briefly about one of her courses.
Thanks, Professor Lam. Can everybody hear me? Okay. I'll just say more specifically about one of the courses I teach, because it's a compulsory course, which means that every English major, once entering into our program, will have to take it. And it's actually the very first English Literary Studies course. So as soon as you enter into our program, actually you're going to see me there welcoming you, all right? So this course is called Introduction to Literature. And just now, Professor Lam has already mentioned, don't feel worried, because I know a lot of you have not studied literature in your secondary school. So this course that I teach, Introduction to Literature, does not assume any prior knowledge, all right? So feel rest assured, really, we're going to start really very slowly, and the course is going to start with very, very short texts, something that you'll be able to finish on your MTR ride, something like that. But of course, I also realize there are some of you who are interested in literature and who have a little bit of English literary studies background. So the course will have something very challenging for you too, because around the middle of the term, the speed will pick up a little bit and we'll read slightly longer pieces. So in a way, the course is trying to strike a balance between people coming from different backgrounds, and students will be very interactive with each other, and they're going to be very supportive to each other as well. What do we study in this course? We're going to actually divide the course into 3 parts according to the 3 main types of literature: fiction, and then poetry, and then drama. So we're going to start with some very short text, short stories, moving on to poems, and finally finishing up the whole course with plays. The whole course is actually going to end up with a comedy. So I always said, this course is going to have a happy ending, all right? So that's the general idea of the course. And in every class, what we're going to deal with are basically 2 aspects. One is literary terms and concepts. The other is close reading of a specific text. So by learning literary terms and concepts, you're going to have the vocabulary and terminology to talk about literature, to express your ideas about literature, to speak about it and to write about it. And more importantly, it's about this very careful, very detailed reading of specific literary texts. And this course is trying to give you a wide range of texts. We're going to read a very, very old text, an ancient Greek play. We're going to look at one poem by Shakespeare, but we're also going to look at some more recent texts written in this century. Okay, so a kind of a taste of little bit of everything. That's what this course is trying to do. And really, I think the question you want to ask yourself is, why should we bother with literary studies? Because I'm sure you've heard a lot of people telling you, literature is quite useless. Well, literature is useless in a sense, but it's useless because we can enjoy it without any sort of, what this might be for, really. That's one thing. And I also want to say a few things about why literature can also be useful in another kind of perspective. Now, one thing about literature is that it's written in a very powerful, very precise language. So by very careful and very detailed reading, close reading of the text, you will actually sharpen your sense of the language, of English language itself. And gradually, by reading literature, you will become a more effective user of English. So in that respect, it's very useful, okay? Another thing very, very useful about studying literature is that you will think that you're only looking at a very short poem or a very short story, but there will be a lot behind this text. There will be a lot of historical context behind this, and you'll also be exposed to some central ideas right at the heart of Western cultural tradition. And in that sense, you're not simply, learning this particular piece. You're being exposed to a much wider range of ideas about Western civilization. So I think in that sense, it's also very, very useful. And some of our students have also talked about how by studying with us, you can also reflect upon how to become a proper university student and how to become, in a way, a human being, what it means to be a human being. And I think by studying literature, really, we are trying to become more sensitive and more sympathetic human beings. So really, that's what this course will start, leading you into this world. If you think about that metaphor of the home that this department is trying to make you feel, then I'm going to be that usherer, okay, to lead you into this home. Think about it and apply to us, come to study with us, and I'll be there to welcome you in the very first semester. Thank you.
Home is also where you start from. So this is a plane taking off. And we like to think of the English department as a place that you can begin your career. Now, in what way? Communications for English Majors, the third strand in our department. In this strand, you will acquire skills in writing and speaking in particular, and in a variety of genres, in a variety of forms, and I've listed 3 there. But don't take my word for it. I'd like briefly to hand you over to the person responsible for these courses, Professor Jason Clayton.
As you can see, that communication skills is a lifelong process and very difficult to master. And one of the things that you'll do if you become an English major, in addition to the courses you'll take in applied English linguistics and literary studies, we also have courses in our communication for English majors stream. So these are 3 courses that you take in your first and third year at the moment, because we wanted to move one of them to the third year of study. And these are courses that teach you to communicate better in English. And this is not an easy task. It is definitely not easy to be standing up here and doing what I'm doing right now. And it does take a lot of practice and study and experience. And so in these courses, you'll learn to speak better, which means to comport yourself well in seminar environments if you go on for future study. And of course, you'll need these skills in business as well. It's really hard to be a good speaker of English and a good presenter. And you'll learn skills like not being nervous, and not saying and like and you know all the time, and speaking in complete sentences and not backtracking and trying to organize your ideas on the spot as you stand in front of people. In addition to that, you'll learn other skills like listening skills and reading skills, but really probably the most difficult and challenging skill would be writing skills. Mainly, we focus these classes on writing skills because writing English is really difficult, and students generally come into the department with much lower writing ability in English than speaking ability. And so in these classes, we teach you how to be a good writer. And of course, I don't have time now to tell you what's involved, but it's things like topic sentences and thesis statements and paragraph transitions and use of quotations in your paragraphs and writing introductions. And the list can go on, and I'm sure you'll look forward to hearing me talk more about these things if you are in the department next year. These courses are small courses also. A lot of classes in the English department, as well as all other university departments, tend to be somewhat larger. The lecture format is common in the university. But these classes are very small because everyone needs intense feedback on their communication skill ability. And so these classes are about 12 to 14 people, and they're taught by professors and also by recent graduates of famous universities in the United States, from Yale University and Williams College and Wellesley College. And so the young people from there come and help us teach these courses, and these are a great part of our department. And so hopefully I will see some of you here next year in our department. Things are very exciting. We have our Andrew Parkin Drama Cup this week, and you should pick up a copy of our See You Writing in English book that's available outside at our station with some good poetry in it. And hopefully you'll come here and bond with other people and have a great educational experience as an English major. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Blackman. Plenty of opportunities for overseas travel if you become a CU student. These 2 opportunities are available only to English majors. English Literature and Cultural Study Tour. Students will spend around 2 weeks in the UK, and in that 2 weeks, you will attend plays and visit relevant cultural sites like galleries and museums. All of this information is on our website. Secondly, Oxford Summer Program, as Liz spoke about. Those beautiful photos of Oxford. You can be in those photos if you become an English major and go on the Oxford Summer Program. 3 weeks of around about 20 hours a week of face-to-face learning. You will also visit plays, galleries, museums, etc. The best bit about both of these things is that they are both heavily subsidized by the department. Right, I'll just allow that to sink in. Heavily subsidized by the department. I'm rushing through because we're running out of time a little bit, but job prospects. I think there is a misconception that if you do English, you become a teacher. Not necessarily so. There are some people who go into education, 15.5%, but it's actually quite a varied spread of jobs, occupations, careers there. A significant handful of our better students become management trainees for places like HSBC, PCCW, Lane Crawford. We like to think that all the courses in our department, one way or another, will aim to make you feel at home in the language of English. You'll know your way around English. You'll be able to express yourself in English, to be yourself in English. And you'll be able to use this department in one way or another as a launching pad to the rest of the world. Professor Haynes mentioned towards the beginning that English, whether we like it or not, is the global language. But we think that to be at home in the language of English is to be at home in the world. I'm more than happy to answer questions that you might have outside, or if you would like to ask some of our wonderful student helpers or some of our other professors, then please feel free to do so. Thank you very much.